We know David as the shepherd who became a king, the boy who slayed a giant, the man after God's own heart. But there are parts of David's story we rarely hear, not because they're unimportant, but because they're uncomfortable. Most believers are taught David's victories. We celebrate his psalms, we admire his courage, we quote his prayers, but what about his failures, his breakdowns, his moral collapse, his hidden sins, his deepest regrets? Because the truth is, David's journey was filled with shadows, dark moments, terrible choices, painful consequences, and yet, this is what makes his story even more powerful. Because God didn't hide his brokenness, God included it to show us something deeper than strength, to show us redemption. This is not a highlight reel. This is not a children's story. This is a raw, honest, scandalous, heartbreaking, and redemptive story of King David's darkest moments and what they reveal about God's mercy. David was anointed before he was appointed. As a teenager, the prophet Samuel poured oil over his head and declared, "You will be king." But years passed before that promise came to pass. David lived as a fugitive, hunted by Saul, sleeping in caves, living among enemies, forced to pretend madness to survive. Even before the crown, the pressure was crushing, and yet David remained faithful. He refused to kill Saul when given the chance. He waited, trusted, worshipped. But that didn't mean he didn't crack. At one point, David, out of fear, fled to the Philistines, Israel's enemies, and lived there for over a year. He even offered to fight against Israel with them. Imagine that. God's chosen king, willing to fight his own people, because fear had clouded his purpose. And that's just the beginning. After becoming king, David rose in power, prestige, and favor. He united the tribes, brought the ark to Jerusalem, established worship and justice. But then, one night changed everything. 2 Samuel 11. It was the season when kings go to war, but David stayed home. He stood on the rooftop, and he saw her, Bathsheba. He could have looked away. He would have repented. Instead, he summoned her, used his power, sinned, and when she became pregnant, he tried to cover it up. He summoned her husband Uriah, one of his most loyal warriors, hoping he would sleep with his wife and unknowingly take the blame. But Uriah had more honor than David did, so David made a decision. He ordered Uriah to be sent to the front lines, then had the army pull back, leaving him to die. Murder, covered in politics, wrapped in strategy, driven by lust, justified by silence. The man after God's own heart had blood on his hands, and for a while, David thought he got away with it. The baby was born. He took Bathsheba as his wife. The palace moved on, but God had not moved on. He sent Nathan the prophet, and Nathan didn't flinch. He told David a story about a rich man who stole a poor man's only lamb. David was enraged. "Such a man deserves to die," he said. Then Nathan turned and said, "You are that man." David could have denied it. He could have killed Nathan. But instead, he broke. He fell to the ground, and he cried out to God. Psalm 51 was born from that moment. "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. Against you and you only have I sinned. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." That was not a performance. That was agony. The child born from that union died. David wept, fasted, grieved, but God still had a plan. Later, Bathsheba gave birth again to Solomon, the wisest king in Israel's history. From scandal came a seed of wisdom, because God's mercy runs deeper than man's failure. And yet, David's life didn't suddenly become perfect. His house began to unravel. One of his sons, Amnon, raped his own sister, Tamar. David was furious, but passive. He did nothing. Years later, Tamar's brother Absalom killed Amnon for what he did. David was now a father, mourning two sons. And it wasn't over. Absalom turned against him, led a rebellion, charmed the people, stood at the gate, sowed division. David had to flee his own city, barefoot, weeping, a king in exile, again. But this time, the pain was deeper, because the threat wasn't Saul, it was his own child. Eventually, Absalom was killed in battle. And when David heard the news, he didn't celebrate. He collapsed. He cried out, "Oh, my son Absalom! My son Absalom! Would I have died instead of you? Oh, Absalom, my son, my son!" That was the heart of a broken father. That was the cry of a man who had seen too much. David's story is not sanitized. It's not edited for comfort. It's raw, ugly, tragic, and yet unshakably human. And in that humanity, we see the power of grace. Because God never abandoned David, even in failure, even in scandals, even in exile, even in grief. David's life was a mixture of anointing and affliction, triumph and tragedy, victory and vulnerability. But through it all, he kept turning back, not to his throne, not to his strength, but to God. That's why David could write, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." He walked through that valley many times, and still, he followed the shepherd. So what does this mean for us? It means no matter how far you fall, you're not too far gone. It means even when you mess up, mercy is still available. It means brokenness does not disqualify you from God's plan. It means you don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You don't have to be flawless to be faithful. You don't have to be clean to be called. David's darkest moments were not the end of his story. They were the backdrop for God's glory. And if God can use David, he can use you. If God can restore a murderer, he can restore your marriage. If God can write Psalms from pain, he can write a purpose for you. The gospel is not about perfect people. It's about a perfect God who meets us in our mess. So don't hide your darkness. Bring it into the light. Let God heal it, transform it, use it. Because of your story, even the ugliest parts can still bring him glory. You are not your past. You are not your worst mistake. You are not what people say. You are who God calls you. Chosen, forgiven, redeemed, just like David.